The city of Vale glittered under midnight lights, but for Serenya Vale, the glow felt like a cruel joke. From the balcony of her modest apartment, she watched the skyline with hollow eyes, clutching her phone so tightly the edge pressed into her palm. Her father's voice still rang in her ears. Weak, defeated, broken. Serenya, the creditors came again. If we don't pay by next week, they'll take the house. And your mother's medicine. We won't have enough. She had promised herself she wouldn't cry anymore, but hot tears blurred the lights below. The Vale family had once been known for their gallery of rare art and hand-woven tapestries. Now, they were drowning in debt after betrayal from a business partner. She had worked every job she could find, teaching, painting commissions, waiting tables. But the money slipped away like sand. No matter how hard she tried, she was always too late, too small, too powerless. Until tonight. Her phone buzzed again, lighting up her screen with one simple message from a law firm. Lord Kaelen Deyar requests your presence tomorrow morning, concerning the marriage contract. Her stomach twisted. His name alone was a shadow. Kaelen Deyar, the CEO of Deyar Enterprises, the empire that ruled not only boardrooms but governments. Ruthless, feared, untouchable. Men respected him. Rivals hated him. Whispers called him the Iron Wolf of Vale. And now, he had chosen her. Not her laughter, not her dreams, not her heart. Just her name, her signature, her existence as his wife, bound to him for reasons she couldn't fully see. In return, every cent of her family's debt would vanish. It should have felt like salvation, but instead, as she stood beneath the sharp wind of the night, it felt like shackles of gold. Her lips trembled as she whispered to the empty air, Serenya, can you really do this? Can you marry a man who doesn't believe in love? She thought of her father's fragile hands, her mother's failing health, her younger brother's tired eyes. Her heart broke all over again. The answer was already carved inside her. Across the city, Kaelen Deyar worked late into the night, his pen slicing across contracts like a blade. He had never believed in marriage, never believed in love. But this union would serve his empire, secure his power, protect his name. What he did not know, what neither of them knew, was that a fire had already been lit, a fire that would consume them both.
Welcome to another episode of Ever After. Kindly comment where you are listening from and subscribe so you don't miss out on our next episode.
Chapter 1. The First Meeting. The elevator carried Serenya higher and higher into the clouds, each glowing number tightening the knot in her stomach. She gripped her purse strap until her knuckles ached. When the doors finally slid open, a secretary in a fitted gray dress was waiting. She didn't smile. She didn't speak much either. Mr. Deyar is expecting you. This way. The corridor stretched long, its walls lined with glass and polished steel. Each step echoed like a drumbeat of doom. At the end, 2 black doors opened to reveal the heart of power. The office was vast, walled with glass that showed the entire city beneath. And at the center, behind a desk that seemed more like a throne, sat Kaelen Deyar. He didn't rise, didn't extend his hand. His silver-gray eyes locked onto her, cool and sharp, and the silence pressed down on her chest until she thought she might break. Serenya Vale, he said, his voice low and steady, like stone cutting through water. Her name on his lips sounded less like a greeting and more like a claim. She steadied herself, her voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Deyar. He studied her for a long moment, his gaze unreadable. Then he set aside the paper in his hand. You know why you're here. Let us not pretend otherwise. Serenya swallowed. The marriage contract. He leaned back in his chair, every movement precise. This union is not about affection. It is not about dreams. It is survival. For you, and for me. Her breath hitched, though she forced herself to meet his eyes. And what do you require from me? His lips curved. Not a smile, but something colder. Loyalty, silence, and the strength to stand beside me when the world is watching." The words struck her like chains, heavy and unyielding. But her family's faces flashed before her eyes, and with trembling resolve, she lifted her chin. "I accept." For the first time, Kaelen rose. He crossed the room slowly, his presence filling the space like a shadow too large to escape. He stopped just inches from her, and though his gaze was frozen, the heat of his nearness stole her breath. "Then understand this, Serenya Vale," he said softly, almost dangerously. "From this moment forward, you are mine." Her heart thundered in her chest, and though her lips parted, no words came out. She had stepped into his world of steel and shadows, and the door behind her had already closed. Chapter 2. The Wedding. The wedding came faster than Serenya could breathe. In less than 2 weeks, she was standing in the grand cathedral of Valen, the place where generations of powerful families had sealed their unions. The air shimmered with chandeliers, marble pillars, and gilded arches, but to Serenya, it felt less like a celebration and more like a stage built for her surrender. Every pew was filled. Politicians, business magnates, reporters with pens sharpened like knives. All eyes were on her, the girl no one had heard of, marrying the most feared man in the city. Whispers buzzed behind lace fans and folded programs. Who is she? Just a poor girl, a nobody. He could have chosen anyone. Why her? Serenya forced her gaze ahead, her hands clasped around the bouquet. She felt their stares like needles against her skin, but she walked forward, step by step, as if pulled by invisible strings. And then she saw him. Kaelen Deyar stood at the altar dressed in a black tailored suit that made him look carved from marble. His silver-gray eyes were fixed on her, not with warmth, not with affection, but with a steadiness that seemed to pierce her very soul. Her throat went dry. The priest's words drifted over her head like a distant chant, promises of vows, of union, of forever. Yet this union had nothing of forever in it. It was a contract, inked not in love but in necessity. When it was time for the exchange of vows, Serenya's voice trembled as she repeated the words. She had to force each syllable past the lump in her throat. Kaelen, by contrast, spoke with calm precision, his tone unflinching, his words sharp as steel. He did not look at her when he said them. He looked straight ahead, as though the ceremony was merely another transaction to seal. When the priest declared them husband and wife, a ripple went through the crowd. Some gasped, some whispered, some even clapped. Then came the moment, the kiss. Serenya's pulse hammered in her ears. She braced herself as Kaelen turned toward her. He did not hesitate. His hand lifted to her chin, tilting her face up. His lips pressed against hers, firm, steady, but cold. The kiss lasted only a breath, yet to Serenya it stretched into eternity. An eternity of chains, an eternity of surrender. The world roared in her ears, but all she could feel was the weight of his claim. When it ended, Kaelen stepped back, his hand falling away, his expression unreadable. For a fleeting second, something flickered in his eyes, something softer, almost questioning. But just as quickly it was gone, replaced by the iron mask he always wore. The ceremony closed and the crowd erupted in applause, though Serenya knew it wasn't for love. It was for power, for spectacle, for the empire of Kaelen Deyar. As they walked down the aisle together, Serenya felt the weight of the vows like invisible chains around her wrists. His arm was linked with hers, firm and unyielding, guiding her step by step out of the cathedral. Outside, cameras flashed, voices called, reporters shouted their names. Kaelen didn't flinch. He didn't slow. His hand tightened around hers, as though daring her to falter. She forced herself to lift her chin, to wear the mask expected of her. But inside, her chest felt like glass cracking under too much weight. The car waited. Black, sleek, and silent. Kaelen opened the door, letting her step inside before following. The moment the doors closed, the roar of the outside world vanished, replaced by the heavy silence between them. For the first time, she dared to glance at him, the man who was now her husband, the man who had bought her future. His gaze was on the window, unreadable. His profile looked as though carved from stone, distant and cold. And yet, she couldn't shake the memory of that flicker she had seen at the altar, the split second where his eyes had softened, as though the ice had cracked. Serenya clutched her bouquet tighter, her thoughts spiraling. What if there was more to him than the world believed? What if beneath that veil of power, something waited to be discovered? The car moved forward, carrying them to his mansion. Her new home, her new prison, her new fate. And as the city lights blurred past the window, Serenya realized that her story with Kaelen Deyar was only just beginning. Chapter 3. The First Night. The gates of the Deyar estate rose high and forbidding, iron twisted into sharp spirals that gleamed in the moonlight. As the car rolled through, Serenya's heart pressed harder against her ribs. The mansion loomed before them, its towers stretching into the night like the silhouette of a fortress. It was beautiful, yes, grand stone walls, glowing windows, gardens trimmed with precision. But to Serenya, it looked less like a home and more like a cage. When the car stopped, Kaelen stepped out first. He extended a hand toward her, not gently, not tenderly, but as if this too was a matter of business. She placed her hand in his, her fingers small against his, and let him guide her out. The doors opened, and inside stretched a hall of marble and crystal. Paintings older than her family name hung on the walls. A grand staircase spiraled upward like a coiled serpent. The silence inside was so complete it swallowed her footsteps. A butler appeared, bowing low. "Welcome home, Mrs. Deyar." The title twisted in her chest. Mrs. Deyar. She had worn it for only hours, and already it felt like a second skin she could not peel away. Kaelen gave a curt nod, his gaze flicking briefly to Serenya before returning forward. "Prepare the west wing," he said to the staff. "My wife will need her own quarters." The words struck her harder than she expected. Her own quarters. Not a shared room, not a beginning of closeness, a separation. Walls between them before they had even crossed the first night. She lowered her gaze, masking the sting in her chest. Of course, she had not expected affection. This marriage had never been about that. Yet a small, foolish part of her had hoped. Hope that maybe in private he would treat her as something more than a signature on a contract. The butler nodded and disappeared into the halls. Kaelen turned to her then, his expression calm, his voice low. "You will find everything you need prepared. If anything is lacking, inform the staff. They will provide it." Serenya swallowed the knot in her throat. "And you?" For the first time that night, his eyes lingered on her, unreadable, silver-gray depths that seemed to weigh her very soul. His lips parted, and for a moment she thought he might say something human, something real. But then his mask slid back into place. "I have work." He turned and began walking toward the far hall, his stride long and steady, his back straight as an unbroken blade. Serenya stood alone in the vast silence, her bouquet still clutched in her hand, though the petals had begun to wilt. She could hear the faint echo of his footsteps until they vanished, leaving only emptiness behind. A maid guided her gently toward the west wing. The room prepared for her was larger than her entire apartment. Velvet curtains, a balcony overlooking the gardens, a bed carved from dark wood. It was breathtaking, and it was lonely. When the maid left, Serenya set the bouquet on the table and sank onto the edge of the bed. Her hands trembled in her lap. "This is your life now," she told herself. "This is what you chose. For them. For your family." Yet as the silence pressed closer, doubt gnawed at her edges. Could she truly live in this house of shadows? Could she stand beside a man whose heart seemed locked in ice? She rose and stepped out onto the balcony. The night air was cool, carrying the faint scent of roses from the garden below. The city lights flickered in the distance, far away now, almost belonging to another life. Her fingers curled around the railing. She thought of the flicker she had seen at the altar, the fleeting softness in Kaelen's eyes. Was it real? Or had her desperate heart imagined it? Behind her, the door creaked. She turned quickly, and there he was. Kaelen stood at the threshold, his jacket discarded, his shirt sleeves rolled back. He looked less like the untouchable Iron Wolf and more like a man weighed down by something unseen. His gaze met hers, steady, but unreadable. Neither spoke. The silence between them stretched, thick with unspoken words, with questions neither dared ask. At last, Kaelen stepped forward, his voice low. "You'll find the nights quiet here. Too quiet, perhaps, but you'll grow used to it." Serenya's breath caught. She wanted to ask him, "Do you grow used to it? Do you sleep in this silence? Or does it haunt you too?" But the words stayed locked inside her chest. He lingered for only a moment longer, then gave a short nod and turned away, vanishing once more into the hall. The door closed softly, leaving her in the quiet again. Serenya pressed her hand to her chest, her heart pounding as if it had run a race. She didn't know what haunted Kaelen Deyar, what shadows he carried in his silence. But she knew one thing: the walls around him were high, higher than the gates outside, and if she wasn't careful, those same walls would trap her too. Chapter 4. The Gala Night. The invitation had arrived on a silver tray, its embossed lettering shimmering in gold. Serenya read it once, then twice, her stomach tightening with each word. The Deyar Foundation Gala. Attendance required. Formal. Required. She had been in Kaelen's mansion for only 5 days. 5 days of echoing halls, silent meals, and brief, cool conversations with the man who was now her husband. She had seen him more with his papers than with her, his study door always closed, the sound of his pen scratching long into the night. Now suddenly, she was to be displayed at his side, the new wife of the Iron Wolf. The evening came faster than she wished. A maid dressed her in a gown of midnight silk, its neckline soft, its hem trailing like liquid shadow. Jewels sparkled at her throat, heavy and cold, gifts from Kaelen delivered without a word. When she entered the marble foyer, Kaelen was already waiting. His suit was perfectly cut, his presence filling the space as though the walls themselves bent to his will. His gaze swept over her, lingering for a moment longer than usual. His eyes, silver as storm clouds, betrayed nothing, yet she thought she saw a flicker of approval. "You're ready," he said simply, offering his arm. Her fingers hesitated before resting on it, the warmth of him startling against the cool silk of his jacket. The gala hall blazed with light, chandeliers raining crystal fire upon the crowd. Laughter, music, and clinking glasses filled the air, yet the moment Kaelen entered with Serenya at his side, the room shifted. Conversations faltered, heads turned, whispers flared. There she is, the new Mrs. Deyar. She looks so fragile. How long do you think she'll last? Serenya felt the sting of every glance. She lifted her chin, masking her unease, but her heart pounded so loudly she feared someone might hear it. Kaelen's hand tightened ever so slightly over hers. His voice was low, meant only for her. "Ignore them, they don't matter." The words were not tender, but they carried something unexpected. Protection. They moved through the crowd like a tide, people parting before them, some bowing, some smiling too widely. Businessmen greeted Kaelen with cautious respect. Women glanced at Serenya with sharp curiosity. One woman, tall and draped in emerald silk, stepped forward with a smirk. Her voice dripped like honey over poison. "So this is the wife. Kaelen, I must admit, she's not what I pictured, so delicate." Her eyes swept Serenya, dismissive, mocking. A ripple of laughter followed from those standing nearby. Serenya's throat tightened, but before she could speak, Kaelen's arm shifted, pulling her closer against him. His voice cut through the air, cold and sharp as glass. "Careful, Isolde. Your tongue is as clumsy as your last investment. Shall we remind the room how much it cost you?" The woman's smile froze. A flush spread across her cheeks as the surrounding whispers turned sharp, directed now at her. She stammered something before retreating into the crowd. Serenya blinked, stunned. She turned her gaze to Kaelen, who had already moved them forward, his expression untouched, as though he had merely swatted away an insect. "You defended me," she whispered, her voice trembling with disbelief. His eyes flicked to hers, unreadable. "You're my wife. No one disrespects my wife." Her chest tightened, her pulse racing. It was not affection, not warmth, but it was something. A shield she had not expected, from a man she barely knew. The rest of the evening blurred. They danced once, his hand firm at her back, his gaze never leaving hers, though his face betrayed nothing. Each step was controlled, each movement precise. Yet beneath it, Serenya felt the thrum of something more, an energy simmering, restrained, dangerous. Later, when the gala wound down and they returned to the car, silence settled between them once more. But this time it was different. Serenya stared at her hands in her lap, her heart still racing from the moment he had pulled her close, from the words that still echoed in her ears. "You're my wife. No one disrespects my wife." She dared a glance at him. Kaelen sat composed, his gaze fixed on the dark streets outside. But she noticed the faintest tension in his jaw, as though he too had felt something shift tonight. For the first time, Serenya wondered if there were cracks in his ice. And if so, what lay hidden beneath? Chapter 5. The Night of Vulnerability. The mansion was quiet when they returned from the gala, silence wrapping around them like a heavy cloak. Serenya's heels clicked against the marble as she followed Kaelen inside. He didn't speak. He didn't look at her. He simply strode forward, his stride long and deliberate, until he disappeared down the corridor toward his study. Serenya lingered in the foyer, her breath uneven. The night had been a whirlwind, the sharp whispers, the cutting stares, and then Kaelen's voice, cold but protective, striking like a blade on her behalf. It lingered in her chest like a flame refusing to die. She turned toward the west wing, ready to retreat into her own silence, when a sound broke through the stillness. A crash. Glass shattering. Her heart leapt. She froze, listening. It came again. A deep, guttural sound, half growl, half moan, from somewhere down the dark hall. The direction of his study. Without thinking, she hurried toward it. Her steps echoed faster, lighter, until she reached the door left ajar. Inside, Kaelen stood with his back to her. His jacket lay discarded on the floor, a crystal tumbler shattered near the desk. One hand braced against the edge of the polished wood, the other tangled in his hair. His shoulders were taut, his breath ragged. Kaelen. The name slipped from her lips before she could stop it. He turned sharply, his eyes flashing silver in the dim light. For the first time since she'd met him, he didn't look composed. He didn't look untouchable. He looked human. "What are you doing here?" His voice was rough, strained, not the smooth steel she had come to know. "I heard," she swallowed, stepping carefully inside. "I heard something break." His jaw tightened. "Leave." The word was sharp, but his face betrayed him. Beneath the mask, she saw something raw, flickering in his gaze. Pain, maybe anger, maybe both. Her heart pulled. She should leave. She should obey, like the contract demanded. But something inside her refused to turn away. Slowly she moved closer, her eyes never leaving his. "You defend me in front of them," she whispered. "Yet you push me away when no one is watching. Which one is the real Kaelen Deyar?" His breath caught. For a moment, the silence between them roared louder than any words. Then, to her shock, he let out a low laugh, a humorless, broken sound. "You think you want to know me, Serenya Vale, but you don't. You wouldn't survive it." Her chest tightened. "You don't know what I can survive." Their eyes locked, the air between them taut like a bowstring. Slowly, Kaelen's hand slid from his hair. His voice dropped, quiet but trembling at the edges. "When I was a boy," he began, and the words sounded as though he hated giving them away. "I learned quickly that the world devours the weak. My father was a tyrant, my mother. She endured him until it killed her. I swore I would never be like them, never need anyone, never let anyone close enough to break me." Serenya's throat ached. She had not expected this, not from him. Not so soon. "Kaelen," she whispered, stepping closer. His gaze burned into hers, sharp yet vulnerable, as though daring her to look away, daring her to see the man beneath the armor. "So understand me when I say this, wife. Whatever you think you see in me, it will not last. The walls are there for a reason." The word wife lingered on his tongue, heavy, complicated. Serenya's hand hovered, trembling, then lowered to rest gently on his arm. His body stiffened at her touch, his breath catching, but he didn't pull away. "You've built your walls so high," she murmured, "but even walls crack. I saw it tonight, and I see it now." His eyes closed, only for a moment, as though her words pierced somewhere too deep. When they opened again, the storm inside them had softened, but only slightly. He pulled back, stepping away from her touch. "Go to your room, Serenya." Her heart clenched at the distance, but she obeyed, her steps slow, heavy. At the door, she paused, looking back one last time. Kaelen stood in the shadows of his study, his shoulders still tense, his gaze lowered to the broken glass at his feet. And in that moment, she realized the truth. The Iron Wolf wasn't as unbreakable as the world believed, and for reasons she couldn't explain, she wanted to be the one who found the man hidden behind his scars. Chapter 6. The Heated Argument. The next morning, the mansion brimmed with its usual silence. Yet for Serenya, nothing felt the same. She had seen a crack in Kaelen's armor last night, brief, fleeting, but real. She couldn't push the image from her mind, his hand gripping the desk, his voice breaking when he spoke of his mother. It made him feel less like a legend and more like a man. And that unsettled her more than the coldness ever had. By midday, she wandered into the library, one of the only rooms that brought her comfort. Towering shelves stretched toward the high ceiling, filled with books bound in leather and gold. She pulled down a worn volume, running her fingers over the faded cover when she heard the sound of footsteps. She turned. Kaelen stood at the entrance, his suit immaculate, his presence commanding as always. But his eyes, the way they lingered on her, felt different today. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice low. Her brows lifted. "Why not? Am I trespassing in my own house?" His jaw tightened. "This house is not yours, Serenya. You live here because of an agreement. Don't forget that." The words struck her like a slap. She slammed the book shut, her voice trembling with a mix of hurt and fire. "And what am I to you then? An agreement to parade around at galas? A convenient decoration? A shield for your reputation?" His gaze darkened. "You agreed to this marriage. You knew the terms." Her chest heaved. "I knew the terms, yes. But I didn't know what it would feel like to stand beside a man who looks at me as though I don't exist. I didn't know what it would feel like to give up everything only to be treated as nothing." For the first time, his composure cracked, his voice sharpened, rising like thunder. "And what would you have me do, Serenya? Tear down walls I built to survive? Open doors I've kept locked all my life, for a woman who married me for money?" The words sliced her. Her lips parted, but no answer came. Silence pulsed between them, heavy and jagged. Her breath shook. His chest rose and fell hard and fast. At last she whispered, Maybe I did marry you for money, but don't you dare think that means my heart is empty." Something flickered in his eyes. Anger, pain, longing, all tangled together. Before she could step back, he closed the distance between them. His hand caught her wrist, not harsh, but firm, pulling her closer. Their breaths collided, hot and uneven. His silver-gray eyes burned into hers, searching, demanding. "Careful, Serenya," he murmured, his voice low, trembling with something he couldn't hide. "You don't know what you're playing with." Her pulse raced. "Then show me. Show me what's behind all of this." The air between them crackled. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then, almost against his will, Kaelen's gaze dropped to her lips. Her breath caught, and before she could think, before either of them could stop it, his mouth crashed against hers. The kiss was nothing like the one at the altar. This one was fire and storm, fierce, hungry, unrestrained. His hand slid to her waist, pulling her closer, as though the distance between them had been torture all along. Serenya gasped against him, her fingers curling into the fabric of his shirt. Heat surged through her veins, her mind spinning, her body answering him in ways she didn't understand. It was raw. It was reckless. It was real. When he finally tore his lips from hers, both of them were breathless, their foreheads almost touching. His voice was rough, ragged. This was a mistake. But his eyes betrayed him. They glimmered with desire, with need, with something he could no longer disguise. Serenya's lips trembled. "Then why does it feel like the first real thing between us?" Kaelen didn't answer. He released her wrist abruptly, stepping back, his mask snapping back into place. But his chest still rose hard, his jaw still clenched, his eyes still burned. Without another word, he turned and left the library, the echo of his footsteps loud in the silence he left behind. Serenya pressed a trembling hand to her lips, her heart racing so fast it hurt. Mistake or not, she knew the truth. The Iron Wolf had kissed her like a man starved, and there would be no going back. Chapter 7. The Walls Begin to Crack. The morning sun filtered through the towering windows of the mansion, casting golden light over the vast, silent halls. Serenya moved through the rooms like a ghost, her thoughts still tangled with the storm from last night. She replayed the kiss again and again, the way his lips had claimed hers with raw hunger, and yet, as fierce as it had been, there was a fragility beneath it that made her stomach tighten. She found him in the study, sitting behind the grand desk, fingers drumming against the polished wood. He didn't look up when she entered, and for a moment she considered retreating. But some invisible pull kept her rooted to the spot. "Kaelen." Her voice was tentative. At the sound of her name, his head lifted slightly. His silver-gray eyes were dark, unreadable, and yet, just for a heartbeat, vulnerable. He let out a sharp breath, running a hand through his hair as if trying to organize thoughts he wasn't ready to speak. "You didn't sleep well?" she said softly, stepping closer. He didn't respond immediately. Then, almost reluctantly, he admitted, "No, I keep seeing her face." His voice was low, husky, with something Serenya had never heard before. Pain. "My mother. The night she—" He swallowed, breaking off, jaw tightening. "It doesn't matter." But it did matter. Serenya's heart thudded painfully in her chest. The walls around him, the ice that had always seemed impenetrable, had a crack, and she wanted more than anything to step inside. "I can listen," she whispered, "if you want me to." He finally looked at her, really looked, and the guarded mask he always wore wavered. "Why would you care?" he asked, almost bitterly. "Because you're more than the man you show the world," she said, her voice steady despite the nerves clawing at her chest. "Because I see the things you hide." There was a long pause, the silence thick with unspoken confessions. Then, slowly, almost against his own instincts, Kaelen leaned back in his chair, letting himself be vulnerable in a way he hadn't with anyone in years. "My father," he began, voice cracking ever so slightly. He built me to be this. Ruthless. Untouchable. And I've lived like that, Serenya. Cold. Unfeeling. Because showing weakness, showing feelings, it always cost me something." She stepped closer, reaching out hesitantly until her fingers brushed the back of his hand. Heat bloomed where they touched, and he didn't pull away. "Then let me see it," she said softly. "Let me in. Let me see the real you, Kaelen. You don't have to carry it alone." His gaze met hers, raw and searching, and for the first time, he didn't hide behind his power. The tension between them was electric, the distance disappearing as he let himself lean forward slightly. I don't know if I can," he admitted. Serenya's hand moved, brushing against his cheek, feeling the warmth beneath the cold exterior. "Then let me help you try," she said, voice firm but gentle. For a moment, nothing moved except the quiet hum of the mansion around them. And then, almost imperceptibly, Kaelen's head tilted, pressing his forehead to hers. "You're dangerous," he whispered. "I've always been dangerous," she teased lightly, though her heart raced. "But only to the walls you build around yourself." He exhaled, a shudder passing through him, and for the first time, the tension between them felt different, not fiery, not hungry, but something deeper, something that made the air around them thrum with possibility. "You're going to ruin me," he muttered, voice low, but his lips curved in the faintest shadow of a smile. "I think I already have," she admitted. And in that shared, fragile moment, something shifted. The ice around Kaelen's heart had begun to melt, not because he wanted to, not because he could control it, but because Serenya Vale had seen him. And for the first time, he didn't want to hide. Chapter 8. Hidden Strengths. Serenya had never thought of herself as a woman capable of handling corporate intrigue. Her life had revolved around bills, debts, and her family's survival. But last night had shifted something inside her, something daring, something fearless. The office floor of Deyar Enterprises was quiet at this late hour. Most of the staff had left, leaving only the hum of computers and the faint scent of leather-bound contracts. Serenya slipped inside, papers clutched to her chest, determined. Kaelen's assistant had accidentally mentioned a critical merger was on the brink of collapse, and she knew she could help. She had studied numbers and reports before, managing her family's finances with meticulous care. Maybe she could do this. Her fingers flew over the keyboard, analyzing spreadsheets, cross-referencing projections, and calculating the tiniest discrepancies. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she worked in silence, adrenaline driving her. Finally, after what felt like hours, she leaned back, scanning her findings. She had done it. She had identified a loophole in the contract that could save Kaelen millions. She didn't wait. Serenya drafted a concise, professional email to Kaelen, detailing her findings. She hesitated only a second before hitting send. Whatever happened next, she had taken the risk. Within minutes, Kaelen's office door opened. He stood there, suit immaculate, eyes scanning the empty floor until they landed on her. He crossed the room in long strides, his expression unreadable, until he stopped in front of her desk. "You're here late," he said, voice calm but holding that unmistakable edge of authority. "I couldn't sleep," she replied, trying to sound casual but failing. "And there was something you might need to see." His eyes flicked to the glowing screen, reading the email she had sent. Then he raised an eyebrow. "You did this?" "I did," she said simply. "I noticed an issue with the merger. I thought I could help." Kaelen leaned against the desk, studying her intently. "You know nothing about corporate law," he said flatly, but there was a flicker in his eyes, a trace of surprise, of admiration. Yet you solved a problem that's been dogging my team for weeks. Serenya's heart skipped. I've always been good at numbers, she said softly, lowering her gaze. And I want to help. Not because I married you for money, but because I care about you. And your company. For a long moment, Kaelen didn't speak. Then he straightened, his usual sharpness returning, but the tone was different now. Less cold, more genuine. You've earned my attention, Serenya, and my respect. She swallowed, her chest tightening at the rare compliment. That means a lot. He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming yet comforting. You're proving to me that you're more than I ever expected, and that I may have underestimated you. His eyes softened, tracing her features with a tenderness he barely allowed himself. Careful. Keep showing me this side of you and I might just fall even harder. Serenya's lips curved into a small, shy smile, heat rushing to her cheeks. Maybe that's the plan, she whispered. Kaelen's gaze dropped to her lips, just for a fraction of a second before he cleared his throat and stepped back, snapping the professional mask back into place. Then get some rest, he said, though the soft edge in his voice betrayed his thoughts. Alone again, Serenya leaned back in her chair, heart racing, mind swirling. The walls between them were cracking, yes, but now, more than ever, she realized the danger of falling. Because Kaelen wasn't just the cold, distant CEO anymore. He was a man, vulnerable, wounded, and dangerously capable of consuming her heart entirely. Chapter 9. The First Real Kiss. The mansion was quiet again, but tonight the silence felt different, charged, expectant. Serenya lingered in the study, a book half forgotten in her hands, when she heard Kaelen's footsteps approaching. Her heart leapt, a mixture of anticipation and dread twisting inside her. He appeared in the doorway, the faint glow of the lamp highlighting the sharp lines of his face. His eyes, silver gray and stormy, locked on hers, and for the first time, there was no mask at all. Just raw, unfiltered Kaelen. Serenya, he said, voice low, almost a growl. We need to talk. She set the book aside, stepping closer. About what? She asked, though her pulse betrayed her. About us, he admitted, taking a step into the room, closing the space between them. About everything I've been trying to fight, and failing. Her breath caught. You mean... He didn't answer with words. He answered with action. Kaelen's hand brushed against her cheek, warm and commanding. The touch was gentle but insistent, and it sent a shiver down her spine. Do you have any idea what you'd do to me? He murmured, his forehead resting briefly against hers. His eyes searched hers, desperate, almost pleading. Every time I see you, every time you touch me with your words, your presence, it's like I can't breathe without wanting more. Serenya's lips parted, heart hammering. I feel it too, she whispered. Even though I'm scared. Even though I shouldn't. He leaned in, closing the remaining distance, and their lips met. This kiss was nothing like the heated, reckless one from the library. It was deeper, more consuming. Tender, yet fierce. A storm of emotion that had been building for weeks finally finding its release. Serenya's hands curled into his jacket, holding him close, while Kaelen's arms encircled her, pulling her flush against him. Heat pooled between them, a magnetism neither could resist. Every touch, every sigh spoke volumes, fear, longing, trust, and an undeniable growing love. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless, foreheads pressed together. Kaelen's voice was a low rasp. You're impossible, he admitted, his hand lingering at the nape of her neck. I've tried to fight this to keep control, but I can't. Not anymore. Serenya's fingers traced the edge of his jaw, her heart swelling with a mixture of triumph and tenderness. Then don't, she whispered. Let me in. Let me see all of you. The real you. Because I'm not going anywhere. For a long, suspended moment, they simply held each other, hearts pounding, breaths mingling. The world outside didn't exist. There was only this room, this night, and the fragile, dangerous intimacy they had finally dared to claim. Kaelen pulled back just slightly, resting his forehead against hers again. God help me. I'm falling, he admitted, voice low, almost broken. You already have, Serenya said softly, her lips brushing his in a whisper of a promise. And in that delicate, vulnerable moment, both of them knew. The walls around Kaelen's heart were crumbling, and nothing, not fear, not pride, not past betrayals, could stop what was blooming between them now. Chapter 10. Secrets Unveiled. The mansion's silence was a stark contrast to the chaos brewing inside Kaelen's mind. He paced the length of his private office, the evening's gala still echoing in his thoughts. Serenya had seemed radiant tonight, effortless in her charm, graceful in every interaction. But something gnawed at him, a whisper of unease he couldn't shake. It started with a casual remark from one of his business associates, a subtle hint that Serenya's family had ties to debts far larger than the ones he'd paid off. The words were innocuous, almost dismissive, but they planted a seed in Kaelen's mind, one that grew rapidly into suspicion. He found her later in the library, sitting quietly among the shelves, the soft lamplight haloing her face. She looked up at him, a tentative smile lighting her features. Kaelen, she said softly, you're back early. He didn't answer immediately. His gaze was sharp, searching, almost accusatory. We need to talk, he said, closing the space between them with deliberate steps. About your family, her smile faltered, a flicker of unease passing over her features. What about them? Kaelen's voice dropped, low and dangerous. Don't lie to me, Serenya. I heard something tonight. Something that doesn't add up. Her breath caught, and her hands twisted nervously in her lap. I don't know what you mean, she said, though the tremor in her voice betrayed her fear. I'm not an idiot, he snapped, pacing again. You married me under false pretenses. I saved your family from ruin, and now I find out there might be more. Secrets. Lies. How much of what I've been told is the truth? Serenya stood, her own anger rising to meet his. You think I married you for anything but necessity? She asked, voice sharp. Do you know what it felt like to watch my family beg for help while I had nothing to give? Kaelen's jaw tightened, his hands clenching into fists. I know the terms of our arrangement, he said, voice cold, controlled, but his eyes betrayed the hurt. But if you've been hiding parts of your past, Serenya, if there's more to your story than what you've told me, then maybe I don't know who I'm married to at all. Tears pricked at her eyes, frustration and hurt mingling into a storm she could no longer contain. Do you think I wanted to be in this position? That I wanted to marry a man I barely knew just to survive? I didn't hide anything. Everything I've done to protect the people I love. And now you're threatening to undo all of that because of whispers and suspicion? Kaelen froze, her words cutting through his anger like a knife. He wanted to argue, to demand the truth, to protect himself, but the raw emotion in her eyes, the unguarded vulnerability, made his control falter. For the first time, he realized that his own pride and fear of betrayal were pushing her away, the very person he had begun to care for more than he'd admit. He started, voice softer now, almost a whisper. I don't know if I can trust you right now. Her shoulders slumped, the weight of his doubt settling over her. Then maybe you need to decide if you want me at all, she whispered, voice breaking. Because I can't live in a house where every move I make is questioned, where every secret, my family's past, my mistakes, becomes a weapon against me. Kaelen looked at her, his chest tight, the storm of his emotions clashing with his desire to hold her, to tell her that none of it mattered, but the words caught in his throat. She turned and left the library, the echo of her footsteps ringing in the cold halls. Kaelen sank into his chair, fists pressed against his forehead, realizing in the crushing quiet that he might be on the verge of losing her, the woman he had finally allowed himself to care for, the woman he had begun to love. And for the first time, Kaelen understood that love wasn't just desire or passion. It was trust. And trust, once broken, was far harder to reclaim. Chapter 11. The Growing Distance. The mansion felt colder than ever. Even the sun streaming through the tall windows could not chase away the shadows that had settled over Serenya's heart. Kaelen had retreated into himself after their confrontation, the warmth and tenderness they had begun to share replaced by icy distance. Serenya wandered through the halls, hands clasped tightly, mind racing. Every interaction felt strained, every word measured. He avoided her gaze, replied curtly when she spoke, and his once commanding presence now seemed like a wall she couldn't climb. She tried. She tried to break through with small gestures, a cup of coffee placed on his desk, a carefully written note tucked into his briefcase, a gentle question about his day. But each attempt was met with silence, with his attention focused elsewhere, as if she were invisible. Her heart ached. She had allowed herself to fall, to hope, and now it felt as though the ground beneath her was crumbling. She remembered the fire of their first kiss, the raw, undeniable connection that had left them both breathless. And yet, now, that same fire seemed to mock her from a distance. One evening, as she sat alone in the drawing room, the city lights casting a pale glow across the room, Kaelen entered quietly. His suit was sharp, his expression calm, too calm, and she felt a pang of frustration. "Serenya," he said, voice clipped, almost formal. "I need some space." Her chest tightened. "Space?" she repeated, trying to keep her voice steady. "Is that what this is? Space because of whispers about my past?" He ran a hand through his hair, jaw tight. "I can't ignore it. I need to think, to process, before I act. Before I make mistakes I can't undo." Serenya's hands curled into fists in her lap. "You're pushing me away, Kaelen," she said, voice trembling. "And the worst part, I'm falling for you. I can't stop it. And now I'm watching you slip further away, just as I've finally started to let myself care." He looked at her then, really looked, and for a brief second, the wall around him faltered. She could see the storm inside him, the desire to reach out, to take her in his arms, to tell her everything, but pride and fear held him back. I don't want to hurt you," he admitted finally, voice low, vulnerable. "But your secrets, your family, it complicates everything, and I can't risk my heart again." Tears welled in Serenya's eyes. "Then stop thinking and start trusting," she whispered. "Because if you let this distance grow, you might lose me entirely, and her voice broke. "I can't survive losing you before we even truly began." Kaelen's gaze softened, shadowed with torment, and he stepped closer, stopping just short of touching her. For a heartbeat, the space between them was electric, filled with everything unsaid, everything they wanted but couldn't admit. But then he turned abruptly, retreating to the staircase. "I need time," he repeated, voice echoing down the hall, leaving her alone with her racing heart. Serenya sank onto the sofa, chest tight, tears slipping freely. She had taken a risk opening herself to him, showing her vulnerability, and now it felt as though that trust had become a wedge between them. Yet deep inside, a small spark of determination ignited. She refused to let this distance destroy what they had begun. Whatever it took, she would find a way to reach him, to prove that her love and her loyalty were worth fighting for. But she didn't know yet that the next betrayal would not come from misunderstanding. It would come from someone intent on using their fragile bond against them. Chapter 12. Threats in the Shadows. Serenya's morning began with an unexpected visitor. A sleek black car pulled up outside the mansion, and she felt a chill as the driver handed her a sealed envelope. Inside was a photograph, one of her attending a charity gala, candid, seemingly innocent, but a typed note beneath it made her blood run cold. Everyone can see the truth about you, Serenya. One wrong step and your reputation, your marriage, everything will crumble. Her hands shook as she crumpled the paper. She knew immediately who was behind it. Lucian Kaelen, Kaelen's most ruthless rival, a man whose ambition was matched only by his hunger for power and revenge. He was a predator in a suit, and now, somehow, she had become his pawn. By the time Kaelen arrived at the mansion, Serenya was pacing the study, her mind racing. The moment he stepped through the door, she held up the envelope, her voice taut with fear. "It's him. Lucian Kaelen. He's threatening me." Kaelen's expression darkened immediately, his body stiffening as rage replaced his usual controlled composure. "Show me." Serenya handed him the paper, her fingers trembling. He read it in silence, jaw tightening with every line, every implication. Then he crushed the envelope in his fist, the sound like a gunshot in the quiet room. "Whoever touches you," he said, voice low, dangerous, "will regret it. I swear it." Serenya swallowed hard, both terrified and relieved. "I don't want to be the reason You're not the reason anything happens," Kaelen interrupted, stepping closer. His hand rested at the small of her back, steadying her. "I won't let him hurt you. I won't let anyone." Her pulse raced as his nearness burned through the fear. "But what if this ruins everything? What if he exposes things about my family? About me?" Kaelen's eyes softened, but the edge in his voice remained. "Then I'll fight it. I'll fight anyone who tries to come between us." He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs brushing her cheekbones. "Do you understand, Serenya? You're not alone in this. I've got you. Always." A mix of relief and longing surged through her, and she leaned into his touch. For the first time since their rift began, she felt their bond, the trust, the fragile connection, rekindle. I trust you," she whispered, her lips brushing his palm. "Even with everything, I trust you." Kaelen's chest rose and fell, his intense gaze holding hers. "Then don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Not him, not anyone. You're mine, Serenya. And I'll protect you, even if it destroys me." She felt her breath catch, heart swelling with emotion. "And I'll stand by you," she said, voice trembling but fierce. "Whatever it takes." For a long moment they simply held each other, the world outside forgotten. And in that embrace, they both realized something crucial. Threats and lies could try to drive them apart, but their hearts had begun to fight together, and neither would back down. Chapter 13. A Bold Move. The city skyline glittered like shards of diamonds through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Kaelen's penthouse. Serenya stood at the edge, phone pressed tightly to her ear, heart hammering in her chest. Tonight, she would no longer be a passive player in the game. She would fight for Kaelen, for their bond, and for the truth. "Are you sure about this?" a cautious voice asked on the other end. "I'm sure," Serenya replied, her tone steady, though her hands shook slightly. "If Kaelen's company collapses because of Kane's manipulation, everything he's built and everything we've started will be destroyed. I can stop it. I will stop it." The plan was risky, even reckless. Lucian Kaelen had insider knowledge, contacts, and a strategy designed to cripple Kaelen's empire. But Serenya had spent nights studying contracts, reviewing reports, and cross-referencing every detail. She had discovered a loophole, a flaw in Kane's plan that could be turned against him, and she had one advantage: Kaelen's unwavering faith in her instincts. By the time she arrived at the corporate headquarters, Kaelen was already there, pacing in the boardroom, tension etched into his features. When he saw her enter, his usual mask of stoicism faltered. "Serenya, what are you doing here?" he asked, voice sharp but with a flicker of worry. "I'm here to protect you," she said, holding up the documents. "I've found a way to stop Kaelen from sabotaging the merger. We can counteract him tonight, if we act fast." Kaelen's eyes scanned the papers, and as he read, the corner of his mouth lifted in a brief, rare smile. "You did this?" "I did," she said simply. "I don't care about the risks. I care about you, and I won't let him ruin everything you've worked for." He stepped closer, the tension in the room shifting from corporate warfare to something more intimate. "Serenya, you're incredible," he murmured, almost to himself. "I don't know what I did to deserve you." She met his gaze, courage and vulnerability mingling. "You don't have to deserve me. You just have to trust me." Kaelen's hand brushed hers, the simple touch sending heat through her veins. He studied her, eyes dark and unreadable, before finally nodding. "Then let's do this. Together." Hours later, after a tense series of negotiations and careful maneuvering, Serenya's plan succeeded. Kaelen's schemes crumbled under the weight of evidence she had uncovered, leaving him exposed and powerless. Kaelen's company was safe, and their trust, forged in the fires of risk and loyalty, grew stronger than ever. As they returned to the mansion that night, silence fell between them. Not awkward, but full of understanding. Serenya had proven her bravery, her intelligence, and her loyalty. And Kaelen, he had seen her in a new light. He stopped in the foyer, pulling her close. "You've risked everything for me," he whispered, forehead resting against hers. "And I—" His voice faltered for a moment, caught in raw emotion. "I've fallen. Completely. And I don't ever want to lose you." Serenya's breath caught, her heart soaring. "You won't," she whispered, "because I've fallen too, and I'll never let go." Their lips met in a tender, lingering kiss, sealing the unspoken promise between them. The battles outside could wait. Tonight, love had won. Chapter 14. Fighting for her. The mansion was quiet, the city lights painting the walls with gold and silver. Kaelen stood in the study, hands clasped behind his back, mind a storm of emotions he could no longer ignore. After tonight, after Serenya's boldness and brilliance, there was no denying the truth. He had tried to fight it, tried to keep his heart locked behind walls built over decades of hurt and betrayal. But seeing her risk everything for him, watching her confront danger, protect his empire and stand tall even when threatened, had shattered those defenses completely. He needed her, not as a wife on paper, not as an arrangement of convenience, but as the woman who had slowly, irresistibly claimed his heart. He found her in the library, seated on the plush armchair where so many of their conversations had begun. She looked up, startled by his sudden appearance, her eyes widening at the intensity in his gaze. "Serenya," he said, voice low but steady. I can't pretend anymore. I can't hold back. I've tried to stay in control, to remain the untouchable Kaelen Deyar, but I'm done. I don't want control. I want you. All of you. Every fear, every secret, every triumph and failure. I want it all." Her breath hitched. "Kaelen," she whispered, her fingers trembling slightly. He stepped closer, closing the distance, his hands hovering at her shoulders before resting gently. "I'm not asking you to stay because of a contract or loyalty or debt. I'm asking because I love you, Serenya, completely. And if you'll let me, I'll spend the rest of my life proving it." Tears filled her eyes, as the walls she had built around her own heart began to crumble. "I've already fallen, Kaelen," she admitted softly. "I was just waiting, afraid you might never let me in fully." A smile touched his lips, rare and genuine. "Then wait no longer," he said, his voice husky with emotion. He leaned down, capturing her lips in a kiss that was tender, possessive, and overflowing with the love he had kept buried for far too long. Serenya melted into him, fingers threading through his hair as their hearts beat in sync. Every hesitation, every fear from the past, every lingering doubt dissolved in that embrace. Kaelen was hers, fully and undeniably, and she was his. When they finally broke apart, foreheads pressed together, Kaelen whispered, "You're mine. Not because of any agreement, not because of anything else in the world, but because I choose you. Always." Serenya smiled through tears, brushing her lips against his. "And I choose you. Always." For the first time, there were no walls between them, no fears, no secrets, no shadows of the past. Only the certainty of love, fierce and unyielding, binding them together as one. Chapter 15. The Veil Falls. The mansion was bathed in the soft glow of candlelight, shadows dancing along the walls as if celebrating the quiet triumph of love. Elena stood near the grand windows, gazing at the city below, heart still racing from the night's events. Every challenge, every threat, every secret had brought them here. And now, nothing could stand in the way of what they had fought so hard to protect. Damien entered silently, the faint click of his polished shoes announcing his presence. But tonight there was no cold formality in his step, no distant authority. He moved with purpose, eyes locked on hers, a fire burning behind the silver-gray depths she had come to know so intimately. "Elena," he said, voice low, deliberate, carrying the weight of everything he had held inside. "No more walls, no more games. I need you to understand. I love you. More than pride, more than power, more than anything I've ever known." Her chest tightened, tears pricking her eyes. "I love you too, Damien," she whispered, stepping closer, closing the distance he had finally bridged. "I've always loved you. Even when I was scared, even when I thought I couldn't." His hands cupped her face, thumbs brushing her cheekbones, fingers tangling in her hair. "Then let me show you. Let me be the man you deserve, the man who fights for you, protects you, and—" He paused, swallowing hard against the emotion threatening to overwhelm him. "Loves you without restraint." Elena's lips trembled as she reached up to touch his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath the crisp fabric of his shirt. "I don't want restraint," she whispered. "I want you, all of you." In a single motion, Damien drew her into his arms, pressing her flush against him. Their lips met in a kiss that was no longer tentative, no longer restrained by fear or pride. It was a collision of hearts, fierce and tender, desperate and freeing. Every unspoken word, every suppressed desire poured into that kiss, binding them together in a way nothing else could. When they finally broke apart, breathless and trembling, Damien rested his forehead against hers, voice husky and soft. "You're mine," he murmured. "Only mine. And I'll never let anything or anyone come between us again." Elena smiled through tears, her fingers tracing the lines of his face. "And you're mine," she said firmly. "Always." The mansion, the city, the world outside, they all faded into the background. In that moment, there was only them, two hearts unafraid to love, unafraid to be vulnerable, and unafraid to embrace the future they had risked everything to claim. For the first time, the veil of power, pride, and fear had fallen. What remained was raw, unbreakable love. Love that had survived threats, betrayal, and secrets and emerged stronger than ever. Damien pulled her close once more, lips finding hers in a final, lingering kiss. This time, there were no hesitations, no walls, just love, fierce, consuming, and absolute. And together they stepped into the night, ready to face the world as one.
Thank you for staying till the end. If you enjoy the video, please hit the like button, share and comment. We'll love to hear from you.